Chapter 13. Ma usually left Kenchi in the third week of June for Ekantwas, bringing in a period of rest and recuperation for all of us. During these retreats, time would slow down and our tired minds would awaken to nature and its scenic beauty. The mothers too were relieved of the relentless commitments they had at ashram in Kenchi. During Ekantwas, every morning Ma would go for long walks in the woods, and it would be such a pleasure to accompany her as she picked wildflowers, showed me herbs in the mountains, and told me about their curative values. Often we would pass a small temple dedicated to a local deity. This would invariably become a resting point. Ma would choose a rock to sit on and tell me about the deities of Kumao's hills as well the stories of her childhood and later life. It was here that I was allowed free play with my camera and I had the best opportunity to photograph Ma. One year in the late 1980s, the mother's departures on Ekantwas was delayed. Ma had decided to stay on as she felt the winding up of the ashram after June Bhandara needed her presence. However, this meant that instead of people gradually vacating the ashram, fresh arrivals began with people pouring in. Ma decided the only way to ease the situation would be for her to move on to the summer retreat, to her Ekantwas, because as soon as the news of Ma's departures would spread, the number of visitors would begin to dwindle. Life in Kenchi would slow down. The ashram could be taken care of, and the staff who had been overworked by now could take turns to go home for short breaks. Ma called some of us, the office bearers, me, and the few who would be accompanying her, and told to get ready as she would be like to leave early next morning. We were all taken aback as no prior arrangements for their stay had been made as yet. Every single one of us was concerned, and apprising her of the predicament, we requested for a few days to organize everything, making the usual travel arrangements and so on. Ma was firm on her decision. In a quiet moment, I asked her where we would be going. Ma cut me short, saying, "We will go wherever Maharaji will take us." We left early as planned. This time, a second car from the ashram escorted my car with the mothers as everyone wanted to ensure Ma's safe arrival wherever she chose to go. It was an unusual drive, stopping at every turn or crossroads and waiting for Ma to tell me which way to go. Making a halt at every site of civilization, the men in our group who were following us would go and look for a suitable accommodation or a dak bungalow for the Ma's stays. We crossed Almora, drove on to Berinag, and from there to Chokori. It was past 5 p.m., and all our efforts had been futile so far. Soon it would be dark, and having driven all day, fatigue and anxiety showed on our faces as we secretly worried about where the mothers would stay that night. In sheer desperation, we went to check out a government rest house, but it turned out to be rather unsuitable. Ma called me to her car then and said that there was a Hanuman temple a few kilometers ahead of Chokori in Kotmanya, and the Pandit Ishwari Dutt was a devotee of Maharajji. Ma said we should go there. The distance was about 20 kilometers and we reached Kotmanya in no time. It was a very remote area, and I could see no hill house or construction of any kind except two tiny shops by the roadside, which were cemented structures. I still remember that one was a small grocery shop, while the other sold tea and samosas. A little ahead, I observed a small temple where it seemed some celebration was taking place. Village women in colorful saris, a few men in kurtas and dhotis, and many children had gathered there. As soon as our car approached the temple, the excitement heightened. As I slowed the car, a small Tibetan rug was quickly unrolled, the wicks of the lamps were lit by women, and a scramble commenced to be in front. When Ma alighted, Arati was done to her amidst singing accompanied by the sacred sounds of conches, gongs, and bells. It was such a beautiful welcome for Ma. The mothers, perfectly at ease, sat in the temple, the women and children crowding over them. I was thoroughly confused. None of us knew where we were going until we arrived in Kotmanya. And here they were saying that they had been waiting for us since the morning. Curiosity got the better of me. I took Ishwari Dutt ji aside and asked him if he had any prior information about Ma's arrival. He smiled, almost with a sense of pride, and said that Maharaj ji had come to him in a dream the night before. He told him that both the mothers would be coming to Kotmanya in the morning. He should make arrangements for their stay. Ishwari Dutt went on to say that Maharaj ji had also said, "Do takat laga dena," have two cots laid out. After a very refreshing ginger tea was served to us in steel glasses in the traditional Pahadi way, at the temple we drove back to where the two shops stood. A few steps led down from the veranda. Walking down, we came to two simple rooms. One had been provided with two beds and a schoolroom desk. I was so relieved to see this Spartan but ideal setting, almost perfect for the mothers, right next to the little window from where the mothers had a beautiful view of the valley below and a small desk where Ma would write Ram Nam. In the other room, the rest of our party settled down for the night and we managed to improvise a kitchen in one corner. Chapatis and a sabji were cooked and bhog was offered to Maharaji's blanket. The next morning, the men who had accompanied us left for Kenchi. The next 3 weeks were spent in the lap of nature. Gentle, undulating meadows, lush with green grass, lay on all sides. Beautiful waterfalls gushed down the hillside, and this was where we took our baths every day. I remember sitting on a rock one day with mothers and suddenly hearing a bubbling sound. Looking for the source, we found that a little spring had broken forth from earth and was now rippling out from beneath the rock. In the surrounding forest were little pathways and clearings where mothers liked to walk in the woods. Ma would pick wildflowers and make tiny little bouquets. She would point out herbs in the mountains and tell me about their curative values. Often we would go past small enclosures erected with a few slabs of stone which were dedicated to local deities. The mothers would tell me about the Devis and Devatas of the Kumaon hills. I loved taking photographs here. Often on these walks, we were joined by the women of the village who conversed with the mothers in their naturally unpretentious way. They would open their hearts to the mothers about their daily household matters. The cow wasn't giving milk, a grandchild was ill, the harvest was poor. The mothers would give them gentle guidance. In the evenings after dinner Prasad, I would read to both mothers from old issues of the Kalyan magazine, which was published by Geeta Press Gorakhpur and a household fixture in those days. There was always a chapter called Bhakt Gatha about the life of some saint, and both mothers loved hearing these. Even though we had brought some supplies with us, for the perishables we were dependent on a truck with supplies that would come to the hillside once a week. Since there was no other traffic plying on the road, I still remember we could hear the truck from far away. By the time it arrived, the entire village would be on the road. We bought potatoes, sugar, jaggery, locally grown pears and apples. The women in the village would send their children in the mornings with milk and curd and vegetables, especially fresh cucumbers and corn cobs from their backyards. We didn't want for anything. When Guru Purnima was nearing, Ma said it was time for us to return to Kenchi. She chose a date for our departure. As always, this was in July, and by now the monsoons were here. There was a sudden outbreak of intense rain in Kotmanya. The villagers told us that overnight the hill road had been severely damaged and a part of it, about a 20 feet stretch, had sunk into a chasm, making it impossible for vehicles to commute back and forth. Two of us walked to the site and saw the huge gap between the two ends of the road. This could only be bridged when the rain stopped. Around midday, members of the Ishwari's family told us the following story. A marriage party had arrived in a bus from Pankhu, which lay ahead of Kotmanya. Naturally, they were very eager to make the onward journey so as not to miss the auspicious time for the wedding. They summoned the villagers and, paying them a generous sum of money, they asked the young men amongst them to fill the gorge with rocks and boulders. A large group of men got together and it took them 4 to 5 hours to fill the gap. The bus was able to pass through. Having crossed, they stopped again and promised some more money to the villagers, requesting the elders to maintain the road till their return the day after. We packed up and left Kotmanya the next morning, reaching Kenchi well in time for Guru Purnima.